the Village of Northfield Committee of the Whole for Tuesday, February 18th, 2025 at 5:30 PM. I'm trustee Tom Whitaker. President Lungmas is out of town in Springfield legislating. Trustee Fowler was supposed to preside, but is stuck getting back from the airport, so I have been asked to preside over the Committee of the Whole. So, welcome, and here we go. Clerk, could you take a roll call?
Trustee Orth?
Here.
Trustee Whitaker?
Here.
Trustee Fowler? Trustee Mendrick? Here. Trustee Gallen?
Here.
Trustee Dinges?
Here.
Great. Anybody from the public who would like to speak, please step up to the podium, your name, your address, and your comment.
Hi, my name is David Junitis. I live in Northfield for 5 years. I worked in Mariano's almost 5 years. I work in Mariano's. I work as a beggar. I used to be a beggar at Jewel in Wilmette for a while. In Wilmette before Mariano's. My niece and nephews love missing me at work, and I know that a lot of you guys shop at Mariano's. Mariano's is closing this summer. It's still saying for me personally, I live in a townhouse. If I miss away from Mariano's, I do not drive. When Mariano's closed, I don't know where I'm going to work. I'm a very independent guy, and I own and pay my mortgage with money. When I get from working, I walk to work independently. I walk to the gym, Northfield Partnership, and I take walks around the neighborhood. Being independent and proud of myself, it would be easy for me to move to a different Mariano's location. I can't walk there because there is no public transportation there. Uber is too much. My sister can always drive me because she drives her kids around. I hope there's a grocery store moves when Mariano's closes. I hope there's a grocery store who hires beggars with disabilities. I love being a beggar. I'm all about customer service. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for your public comment. It takes a lot of courage to come speak to a group of people, especially a village board. But I will say that, and I can speak on behalf of everybody sitting up here, that our ultimate goal is to hopefully get another food store back in town and to get you a job again. Thank you. Next.
Kathy Estabrook, 1620 Mount Pleasant. I've been asked to make an announcement. The announcement is for the Avoca School District 37 Northfield residents. The Wilmette League of Women Voters Avoca Candidate Forum will be held on Saturday, March 1st of 2025 at the Wilmette Village Hall. There are 2 candidates. The Village Hall is at 1200 Wilmette Avenue. The Avoca Forum starts at 10:15 a.m. until approximately 11:30 a.m. For the East Northfield residents, the Winnetka Park District Candidates Forum, so the Winnetka Northfield Kenilworth League, will be on Sunday, the 2nd of March, at the Winnetka Congregational Church, 925 Pine Street, from 1 to 2:30.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Hi, my name's Alicia Ballar. I live on Hap Road. I reviewed the document that the staff put together for the discussion today on the Hap Road Improvement Project. I noticed that an evaluation group is recommended and residents will be included in that, it's stated, so that's really good. I was concerned to read that the previous project goals are restated in that document. And the question is asked, should these goals be carried forward? It's worth noting that these goals were centered around safety issues that we know do not exist. And they were the goals that were designed to support a roundabout. So for example, simplifying vehicular movements at intersection, minimizing vehicular points of conflict, among others. So residents have made it clear they don't want a roundabout, and they are not accepting the claims that this intersection at Happen Orchard has a traffic or pedestrian safety problem. Why would we be returning to these goals that residents already dispute? So the document states a recommendation that the village board provide the evaluation group with some guidance regarding the project goals. You're missing a big, important step here. Our residents are concerned and engaged, and they want and should be given the opportunity to express what they would like to see happen on Hap Road. It would be very easy to field a few surveys, conduct some focus groups, and see what residents really do want in their main business district. That insight then should be the foundation for new goal setting, not the old goals, but new goals that's set by this evaluation group. So rehashing these misaligned goals would be for an unpopular plan and a process would be a mistake. So I work in consumer marketing. I know a lot about doing surveys like that. I'd be happy to help if anybody would like to discuss it. I'm available.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
I'm Sean Davern. I'm at 1633 Elder Lane, and I've just prepared a couple comments here for you.
Great. If you could speak into the microphone, that'd
Sure.
be great.
So I just wanted to take a moment to address the priorities of the village. Specifically, I have concerns about the continued focus on the Hap Road Improvement Project. I've lived in Northfield for 10 years, and I've never seen significant concerns personally about the Hap Road. There are occasional traffic delays, sure, and those can be solved, I would think, with basic fixes, adding a crosswalk, adjusting speed limit, or improving signage. These are low-cost, common-sense solutions. Instead, we're talking about spending, if I understand correctly, hundreds of thousands of dollars on a redesign plan for a project that lacks a clear and urgent need. Meanwhile, a real and immediate danger is being ignored, and that's the lack of a barrier along the expressway. I'm fully aware that the expressway and the frontage roads are owned and operated by IDOT, but that does not mean that we should ignore this problem. This past summer, a tragic accident occurred where a car veered off the highway, crashed onto the frontage road, and erupted into flames. The driver was killed on impact, and the burning vehicle came to rest just feet from where a family of 4 was sleeping inside. Fortunately, the fire was extinguished before it could spread to the house, but it was a matter of luck, not planning, that prevented an even greater disaster. So these are not hypothetical dangers. These are real dangers that are happening, and they will continue to happen unless action is taken. Beyond the safety risks, the lack of a barrier also creates a privacy and security concern. The long stretch and the northbound exit ramp provides a direct and unobstructed view into the residential areas and our public park where our children play. This is all at eye level, and anyone exiting the highway has a clear line of sight into the town's most vulnerable spaces, with nothing deterring them from stopping or entering. I travel extensively for work along Illinois and Wisconsin and Indiana. I've never seen anything quite so, a view so unobstructed into a neighborhood. There's usually a barrier or a berm or something. From Winnetka to Willow, it's just, we have a chain link fence, and I just think this is a huge problem. And again, I understand the frontage roads, they're owned and operated by IDOT, I get it, but we still need to find a solution, and we need leadership behind this. I think the village leadership should be spearheading something to take place here, because this is gonna be a problem. It's just a matter of time. And I just think instead of addressing this issue, we're focused on the Hap Road, where problems can be addressed with simple fixes and improvements could be made, but I just think more needs to be done, and I urge the board to make this a priority. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good evening, Fred Steineman, 141 Hap Road. I'm going to go back to the Hap Road project again and how it was brought to this board after residents received letters of acquisition, land acquisition from Santa Cruz. And since our December meeting, and I believe the communication back to the county, we've heard nothing in regard to that acquisition process stopping or pausing. And I was hoping that that might be part of the discussion that the village has had with the county in regard to the Hap Road project. With this new discussion and the committees that will get formed for this, on this topic, I would hope that the subject of land acquisition regarding the south end of Hap by Winnetka not be a part of it, where the land needs to be acquired in order to straighten the street, which is what the county proposed. On another subject, I would also like to address how the board was brought to the attention of this topic of Hap Road last fall, and after a couple of meetings and county doing their presentation, all the information was put out there for everyone to see the pros and the cons of the project, you know, and we focused a lot of attention on the roundabout. And at the October meeting, a couple of members expressed their opinions and thought that, and we as residents thought that we might get the opinions of most of the board in order to perhaps move forward and slow this down. And a few members weren't ready to voice their opinions, let alone in favor or not, but said they would rather wait for a poll result from the November ballot. And this was a question that was provided by Pam from Metamorphosis regarding the roundabout, and to get the question out there that residents may not be aware of. And we know that there are changes coming on the board here, and that some members are looking to renew their positions and such. But if someone can't express their opinion without a poll, I don't know if that's the right place for them to be here representing us for the village. Thank you.
Any other public comment? Mr. Graff?
Hi, Don Graff. I live on the east side of town. I just had knee surgery, so as you see, I'm kind of walking like a toddler with a fully loaded diaper right now. I just want to say, what a difference a year makes. Last February, in this room, we were told there won't be a referendum. Won't be able to do anything about this thing. The county had it in the bag. Boy, oh boy, what a difference a year makes, and we've come a long way, baby. The great thing I'd like to see, too, is there's so many people getting involved, both for the Hap Road project and for the roundabout. We might need them in the future. And I'd like to tell you a story. This might become a moot point after talking to Trustee Dingus a little while ago. But I went to my dentist a few months ago. And he works across the street, north side of Willow Road. So there's going to be a procedure, and he gives me some Novocaine. And while we're waiting for it to get to work, he asked me, what's going on in Northfield? Well, we talk a little bit about the roundabout. Remember, this was last fall, and about the Hap Road project. And it seems that there's a groundswell of people that are going to make these things go away from Cook County. And then he asked, well, what about downtown? I heard something about that. And I said, well, have you heard about the 2040 master plan, the 2040 village plan for the future? And he goes, I haven't heard about that. So I said, well, part of that plan is kind of goofy. First of all, it's going to take care of the whole village. It's going to be a futuristic type thing, change some lights, change some streets. But the downtown area, if you take it literally, they're saying every building downtown will be demolished, including this one, by the way, but I digress. And he goes, well, that's terrible. Then he asked the magic question, well, what's going to happen to my building? And I go, well, you know, that's going to be down as a hotel entertainment district. It's going to be rezoned. He goes, what? Now, he leaves the room, and I'm thinking, oh, that's just great. I just riled up my dentist. He's going to come back, take out his drill, and take it out of my molar. It'll be something like, oh, they're going to do what to my building? Oh, Jesus. So you got to watch where you're at when you do these things. And finally, just a couple weeks later, I'm at another doctor's office. Same thing happens. He's in the Northfield area. His building would probably be destroyed too for something new. And he's getting ready. He's prepping me for a procedure. And he asked me, well, what's new in Northfield? Well, having learning my lesson, I go, oh, nothing. Everything is fine. It's beautiful. Now, you're probably guessing that this procedure was a colonoscopy. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Thank you, Mr. Graff. I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the January 21st, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
No one opposed. All right, moving on to item number 4 on the agenda is the discussion concerning the proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget. Mr. Brennan?
Thank you very much. I'm sure that's why everyone's here tonight, because you're so excited about our budget. So let me see what I can do about explaining it a little bit and getting you even more excited. So this evening, we're going to spend about half of our meeting time going over the budget. The second half of this is going to be talking about the Hap Road project. So the first thing we did is, if you've been into some of our meetings lately, we talk about our goals and objectives for the fiscal year. The board has received those. They're included in the meeting packet. We're going to do a check-in on those goals and objectives. I'm going to paint a bit of a picture of what national through local economics we're looking at as we're starting to prepare the budget. And then we'll go over the proposed capital improvement plan. That's a plan where we look at both the current fiscal year budget and then plan out for 5 years for some of our major equipment purchases and do our best to level out those expenses. So the first is the goals and objectives. You saw in the packet we had an updated list where we've been able to paint in a little bit more detail and some financial numbers regarding those items. And as we step through those, if there's an area where the board has a question, would like something changed, removed, et cetera, just please let me know. So the first series on that list, and these are presented in no particular order, is strategic planning. As been noted already this evening, we're going to have a newly constituted board in May. This is that time of year when the cycle when we have 4 seats up versus 3 of the total of 7. So it's a really good time to go through a strategic planning exercise, talk about what the board would like to achieve in the mid to long range. And there's $3,500 budgeted for that if we need to bring in a consultant to help step us through that process. Next item is an update of the design guidelines. Steve, how long has it been since the guidelines have been updated? I'm sorry, I can't remember.
2007, I believe.
So we're getting close to 20 years since our design guidelines for our commercial areas have been updated. Northfield is a town that we don't have design guidelines or architectural requirements for our residential areas. It's only the commercial areas. This $15,000 budgeted would help us get through graphics designs examples using an architectural firm, primarily driven by staff on going through that process for updating the guidelines.
Could you just, one of you, give an example of when you use those guidelines for everyone, just so we're all clear on what that means?
Yeah, the guidelines are, it's actually a document that talks about the appearance or the types of materials, the type of architecture, kind of the aesthetic that the village wants to see. And our current guidelines only apply to our village center right now. And again, they're getting a little long in the tooth. But I think the overarching goal there is to develop a certain type of aesthetic, and that the components of that include types of building materials, types of architectural features that we'd like to see, articulation of buildings in and out type of thing, as opposed to straight monolithic walls. Colors, kind of the whole gamut of things that give you a sense of place, feeling of the building, as opposed to the bulk of it, setback and the zoning stuff. So it's really an aesthetic kind of guide.
So normal guidelines. Normal guidelines.
Yeah, design guidelines, yeah.
Included in that is anything like murals or public art, or is that separate?
Yeah, the design guidelines would address things like murals and public art, as far as whether it should be encouraged, kind of what the context might be, you know, it would address that.
Okay. Next on our list is the Hap Road revisioning, which is what we'll be talking about a little bit later this evening. This $262,000 provides both the estimated engineering cost for the revisioning as well as outreach for residents through text messages, email, mailings, et cetera. There's money budgeted for that. This is an estimate based on looking at where this phase was 10 years ago when you started it and projecting the cost forward, in addition to speaking with a current engineer to make sure we're in the ballpark.
When do you want feedback on various things you're going down? Do you want to go through all of them and then get feedback, or as we go?
I'm perfectly comfortable as we go, if you don't mind.
No, I don't mind. I was going to ask the same question because
Okay.
I think everybody's going to have
Yeah.
something to say about everything as you go. So I
So-
would ask, though, that if there is public comment regarding this, that we save those till the end. Thank you.
So I'd like to talk about the Hap Road Improvement Project a little bit and the wisdom of spending $250,000 on engineering at this point in time. We have many residents here who have been very vocal about their opinion on this project, and I think we have learned from the mistakes we made in the past. So I guess I am wondering about the wisdom of putting a large amount in our budget for engineering, when I really think what needs to happen is our residents need to come together and sit around the table and talk about what they want for the corridor. And I think that we can do that without having to spend additional funding when we're already looking at some potential shortfalls in our budget and in our future budget because of the sales tax revenue issue with Mariano's. So we've got a lot of really smart residents here. Many of them are sitting in this room, and I would love to see us really tap into the expertise of the community and really get to a point of what we want for Hap Road, because we know what we don't want, and we've learned that lesson. So why go through this process again and spend additional funds when I think that we can have a very lovely conversation among residents, do some public meetings, spending some money on mailings and text alerts makes sense. Alicia certainly mentioned that she can help with consumer marketing, and we could be smart about what that looked like. But I think this is a great opportunity for us to really take the pause that the residents are asking for and begin to reimagine Hap Road based on today's numbers, the people living in our community today, and our businesses, and before we commit to spending a lot of engineering dollars. Because in my view, if we engage an engineer, they're going to, unfortunately, because it's their job, they're going to tell us what we need to know about safety and about, you know, whether utility lines line up or not. But at the end of the day, we really have to start with what's the vision and what's the goal of this location. And I think until we as a community land on what that is, it's a little premature to spend money on engineering.
Can I just share something with the whole group? I went through and I found meeting minutes from a meeting dated November 14th, 2016. Excuse me. And this was the infancy of the steering committee for Hap Road. And the intention of the steering committee was intended to provide local perspective and input to the design team regarding concerns and issues for the existing Hap Road and to help identify the needs and goals of the proposed Hap Road. The steering committee will help to engage their respective associations or constituents to participate in the project's future public meetings. The committee will help ensure the proposed project is consistent with the community's vision for the future of Hap Road. That's what's most important, is the future of Hap Road, and including all the stakeholders, businesses, and residents along Hap Road. The two key pieces that stuck out to me were items number 5 and 6. In regards to a potential roundabout at Orchard Lane, the steering committee thought it would not be well received by the public since roundabouts are not common in the area, the driver demographics in the area, and need for improved pedestrian movements at the intersection. And number 6, all off-street parking should be retained. On-street parking should remain intact. But it was noted that municipal lots have additional capacity if pedestrians' access to the municipal lots cannot be improved. And I find that this committee was formed in the two key components of the process completely ignored those two key items. And I think that, as you said, Tracy, the most important thing is instead of not re-envisioning, but reinvesting, because we are reinvesting in the community, is before we figure out a number, is have a steering committee that includes the businesses, that includes the associations, but also includes the residents that it's going to impact. And I feel like we have Alicia, we had Francisco, the architect who's willing to offer his service. We have so much available to us and so much talent in this community, both from the businesses, the residents, and people who want to help, that I think before we even consider a number, we really need to see what's out there for us and who's really willing to step up.
Yeah, and I agree with Tracy and Tom, and I would take it a step further. So 9 years ago, at meeting 1, the steering committee got it right. They looked out and said, roundabout doesn't make sense. That's not our downtown. But something happened between then and I think it was meeting 3, when all of a sudden the roundabout was back in the discussion and some business owners who were uncomfortable with that and some condo owners suddenly were uninvited to the meetings. So clearly there were people, powerful people, who wanted a roundabout and other improvements for Hap Road. And so in many ways the steering committee got hijacked. It got engineered, and I would argue it got engineered by the engineers. And again, I've worked with engineering companies in virtually any project I've worked on. They can be great collaborators. They can also be really good at pushing their agenda and what's good for their bottom line. So I do not support, I have serious questions about Patrick Engineering and RENA and their role in this. They sat here on September 11th and we asked some really basic questions. Like, can we put a stoplight at the intersection, Orchard, and, oh, it's too close to Willow Road. Well, it's 410 feet on Willow Road heading east and west to a stoplight at Old Hap Road. It's 409 feet if you come down south, down Hap Road. It's the same thing. So the simple question is, well, would IDOT take a look at it? And the answer was, no, that's impossible. It was just very implausible. So I don't feel like we've had good partnership. But the most important thing, I think, is this tremendous opportunity. Hap Road is our Michigan Avenue. It is a road that we all like. It means different things to all of us, but I think our residents have some very clear ideas. And it's funny, the 2040 plan, our caucus, everybody talks about how we're a small town. We want this small town feel. But all of a sudden, we were going to become a feeder for excess traffic on the Edens? How did we lose our way? And I guess I would argue the citizens didn't lose their way. They weren't in the car when it all happened. So we need to slow down. We need to park the car. I want our residents to talk about the look, feel, and experience of Hap Road. What do they want it to look and feel like? And I think the conversation can include our town center. You know, the 2040 plan talks about, you know, hey, if we lose the grocery store, we could have this town center. We're talking about some zoning changes to the north. What do our residents want our downtown to look and feel like? We have the opportunity now to have that discussion. And engineers have nothing to do with this discussion. So I look forward to our creative, smart, energetic residents getting together. And again, a lot of it is already here in their steering one. The 80%, they nailed it. They were going to get an A, and they got an F. So we don't need to do it again. We do not want to run back what we did. We want to start over with a new approach.
Well, I think it's critical. I think it's critical, and we push this all along, that the business community and the residents, as you can see by the vote that Pam put together, getting that on the ballot, that that's what they want. And that's what, as trustees, we need to listen to them, and we need to push forward, but we need to take our time. Hap Road, when it gets done, is going to serve the business community, the residential community, and primarily impact the people that live on Hap Road, Colonial Lane, Holder, Northfield Square, 308 Hap. Those are the people that are impacted. And a lot of the people are also talking about the speed, and that's a concern. And that's something I think we have to talk to Patrick about, and potentially right now the village president and the county. That's something we can do right now. I spoke to Patrick earlier today, and I know that we can get the speed limit reduced. And I think that's something, first and foremost, that we don't have to worry about engineering or anything else. We can go to the county and say, we want the speed to either be 30 or 25. Willow Road right now is 30 miles an hour. Why is Hap Road, why is Wagner Road 35 miles an hour? Yeah, it's 30, but I'm saying, but we can reduce it. And I think reducing it is an issue that's come up with people that are trying to pull out of Northfield Square, that are trying to pull out of Colonial Lane, because of where the road curves there, they always have a problem getting out of those areas. So they feel unsafe pulling out because they look left, they look right, next thing you know, there's a car barreling down on them as they're trying to pull out. And especially in bad weather, whether it's dark, whether it's rainy, whether it's snowy, it impacts it even worse. So there's a lot that we can do, and I think it's critical at this juncture that we take our time, we sit down with the residents and the business community, the people that know the community best. The engineers don't live here, they don't work here, they don't know what we know. You know, take the people that actually live here for the long term, or whether they lived here 5 years or 50 years, they need to be the ones that set up and design what we're going to have on Hap Road. And it's going to impact the residents and the businesses significantly. So we really need to slow it down, take a look at what we need to do. And we have, like we said earlier, lots of experts here that are here. We have experts that aren't here. There's a gentleman who lives on Country Lane that volunteered to put a hole, that's an engineer, volunteered without any cost to the village to put a plan together. And that plan was beautiful. And I don't know if everyone's been able to see it, but that's something that we can work on. And I think that's really what we need to do. So I would agree that at this point, we don't need to budget X amount of dollars for engineering. I think we can probably take that out and significantly save our budget by not having that in the budget. I mean, we might need a small amount, but I think that that's the vision that I think the residents and the business community have, and I think the board should have moving forward.
Great, thanks. Trustee Galen.
I think the revisioning process is definitely a goal and objective, but yeah, we can form this committee and see what we all want without having to see what the engineers want and without that cost. And I think that makes the most sense. So like, why don't we put together the committee, see what goals come out of that? And then once the committee has its goals, then we can start to engage on what the cost would be and who to engage to figure out what the cost would be. This 262 number should be almost nothing.
Thanks, Trustee Galen. With that being said, do you want us sitting here to to give direction or give our thought. I mean, you know what our thoughts are as of right now. But I think the general consensus, unless you want to wait for the president or trustee Fowler to all hone in on this as well, but it sounds like on this specific HAP revisioning, we do have a majority of the board here that's advising that I think the key is to start out and start sooner than later establishing some sort of steering committee.
Yeah, it's a unanimous decision. It's not the majority, so.
Well, we are a majority right
Yeah,
now, so.
right,
but-
okay.
And unanimously, but yes.
So, yeah, right now, we're working on goals and objectives, so we'll get into a full discussion of
Okay.
HAP soon.
Okay.
But for me, I hear a consensus from the group of, don't budget for anything other than the minor outreach skills that you anticipate now, and we'll come to it later. So if we need engineering services later, we'll engage an engineer, and we'll come up with that number. So
Correct.
it remains an objective, but pull that number out.
Great.
We'll make it happen.
Thank you.
Next item on the list is $16,000 for economic development. This carries a number of different items in it. It's everything from starting to move our chamber membership into this area, so we start tracking all what we do for economic development, as well as starting to actually try to do outreach for our community. And that is getting involved with the Society of Shopping Centers, doing outreach, doing some advertising, doing mailings for businesses, and truly reaching out. One of those pieces is the development of a grant for businesses to be able to do facade improvements, and putting a small number there, it was $7,500 if I remember correctly, to see if there's interest for that assistance level. Next.
Any questions, comments from the board?
I'm glad to see that we're putting economic development for business development in our budget to actually go back out. Because back in 2000, when we had the crisis with COVID, Trustee Whitaker and I were on a committee when Joan Frazier was the president to move and help the businesses get through that bad time. So I think it's good that we continue to do this, and I know the business community will be very thankful that we're doing this.
So the next item on the list is public parking enhancements. This is something that's been talked about since I've been here, is both the development of a lot on the Cook County/IDOT property on the north side of Orchard Lane, northeast side, as well as creating some extra spaces where we've got it on Walnut across from the police department, because sometimes that parking area is full. So combined, those are about $366,000. I think we have funds allocated to us from the state. So I think we can use those funds to fully cover this cost, so it's a net zero for us. That's why you see me put grant after it. But in local budgeting, if we spend the money, we have to budget it. So even though there's a net zero, we have to budget the expenditure. We also budget the revenue from that to zero out.
Can I ask a question? I was looking forward to hearing Trustee Fowler's thoughts on this because he's so closely involved with commercial real estate. Is there a timeline on this public parking and on the grant at this point? Because, again, I look at these large expenditures, and I know we hope we can get 100% grant money for it, but is this something that has to be done in this budgeting cycle because of IDOT, or is this something that, as we start to reimagine Hap Road and we talk about what Mariano's may or may not look like in the absence of the grocer, do we want to, again, to Trustee Dingis's point, spend more time reimagining downtown before we spend money on a parking lot that is just another opportunity to, pave paradise, if you will. It's not a particularly exciting little stretch of land there, but it's more asphalt or concrete that we're putting down that I can't say whether it's something we absolutely need to do this year or we need to take another step back and wait until we're a little further along on with our landlord on Mariano's and re-envisioning Hap Road.
Well, and that was a question that I had is really the intent on expanding public parking was because of the roundabout and the spots that roundabout was gonna take. So I look at it like, this is a huge sum of money to potentially in the future advance a different agenda on Hap Road if we are saying we have more public parking. Where I talked with a couple of the businesses who actually called me and said, what's the public parking for? We have plenty of public parking, it's just not used. I'd rather take this money and improve our municipal lots that we have in the signage and striping than take on additional parking spots. That's my thought. Trustee Galen?
The grant money, what else, what's it for? Like, what else could it be applied to, or is it specific to this?
Sure, we have been authorized for 2 tranches. One is, and I may reverse the numbers, I believe it's 300,000 for stormwater improvements. The other is 200,000 for capital improvements. That capital improvement is generally something that would be long-lived, an improvement for the village. If I also remember correctly, we have to allocate the funds by the end of the year, the calendar year 2025, as in pick a project, but you don't necessarily have to have spent them by December 31st. I'll have to confirm that with the state, but I'm pretty sure that that's the requirement.
Is that money still gonna be there, is the question.
I believe so. It's something that was, the senator got for us several years ago, and it's taken years to come through the process to what actually was put in the budget. Now, is it possible that at some point the state says, you know what, we didn't get federal dollars, so we're not going to issue these because you haven't picked a project yet? Possibly.
But that does make it possible as we go through this, budget workshopping to potentially say that we take $200,000 and we, resurface our municipal lot now and spend money on striping it and maybe put in some lights there so that people feel safe and comfortable walking across the street after hours if they've been at the Hap Inn. So can we, I guess as a to-do item, can we look into what that particular grant, now stormwater management is a different issue and probably doesn't apply to that municipal lot, but could we look at the grant money and better identify what we could use it for so we can get it on our list and we can get our projects in for consideration, but maybe it's not this public parking lot.
Sure.
And can we break up the grant money, or is it for one project?
You can use it as long as you can account for your expenditures. The 200,000 in capital improvements is generally anything that would be bondable. So if you could issue bonds to do the work, you could use it for that. A resurfacing project generally wouldn't be considered bondable, but the installation of lighting or curbs, things like that are more long-lived, would be bondable.
Would the water main project on Hap Road be something that grant money could be applied to?
Yes.
Okay, so that would probably be a better fix, because we have to do that anyways. And before we do anything on Hap Road, it would be nice to get the 90-year-old water main replaced, right, Chief?
Well, that's your decision. I can't say whether it's better or worse.
Well, no, but knowing the industry that we've both been in for our lifetimes, that the water main clearly needs to be replaced for a fire protection standpoint, as well as the residents getting, safe water, not having water main breaks, and et cetera. So, and I think that's something that we know has to be done. We've talked about it before the Hap Road project gets done. No matter what gets done on Hap Road, that water main is well overdue to be replaced. So that's
let me rephrase this. Do you not want us working on this in the next fiscal year?
The public parking that we're discussing? No.
Trustee Fowler has joined us. If I could just weigh in, I think the IDOT parking lot is a touchy subject because it seemed to accelerate and get momentum right when this whole roundabout conversation was happening, and it was perceived by many members of the community as kind of an end run of well, we're going to take that off the table, we're going to solve this parking problem, so Pam, you got nothing to worry about because we're going to send them to the alley behind you and they'll go park over there and everything will be. So I think it's a touchy little spot over there, so I wouldn't mind seeing that go off into the background until our residents are convinced that, and again, there have been people who've come here and said they want another vote on the roundabout, but I think, Patrick, I think your letter to the county was pretty clear about what the board has said and what the public wants, but I am very enthusiastic about making the parking lots we have as effective and aesthetically pleasing as possible. I don't support the IDOT initiative at this time.
Do we want to let Trustee Fowler know where we're at?
Well, we should let the record show that he's arrived.
Right, so Trustee Fowler has joined us at 6:16. We've talked about strategic planning, design guidelines, re-envisioning Hap Road. We had talked about 262,000. The general consensus amongst the current members was that's a really high number when we should really be starting to re-engage the community in the planning process. And now we talked about economic development, and everybody's for that. Public parking, we're talking about the purchase of the property. And now the real intent of that was to replace the parking potentially displaced by the roundabout. But even more so, would it be better for us to take that type of money and improve our existing municipal lots with signage and lighting to make them more usable than the lot behind Stormy's? And everybody has shared theirs, and if you have any thoughts on that, the potential purchase of the public parking behind on the county property.
I think, first of all, I'd love to understand the public parking and how it's utilized today.
Right.
I don't know the last time we had anybody study that to actually look at what's being utilized. So Barnaby, I like your idea about making it aesthetically pleasing, but if no one's using it, I don't want to throw good money at bad there either as well. So, but I do see this as an important opportunity for the village to garner public parking, which may engender better development around it, that you have control of that site, right? And so I think I don't want to miss an opportunity there. Now, the cost notwithstanding, those are my thoughts about it.
Awesome. And actually, I'm glad you're here because I know you're part of this, but anybody else have anything regarding the public parking? No? So I think you have a kind of a direction.
Almost.
Okay.
Tom, there was one other thing. The only thing we ought to probably talk to is the business community and see what their needs are and if they feel that we need additional parking in a location, whether it's at the property.
I think,
we can double check.
The business owners, if they have thoughts on this, I'm sorry, we'll have an opportunity once we get through this discussion to be able to come up and share your thoughts regarding the additional public parking behind. Is that clear? Great, thank you.
So this number that we plugged in here was to get through the lease discussions, negotiation, and actually construct the lot. Do you want us to continue efforts to get a lease since we have IDOT's attention now? Or do you want us to stop on that also? Because we need to probably spend, I'm ballparking here, 25,000 more in engineering fees as we go through with IDOT to show that this stormwater can be addressed properly.
I think that moving forward with discussions on that property makes a lot of sense. I mean, as Todd mentioned, we're all really concerned about business development in our downtown area, and having some control over that lot and knowing that what we can and can't do with it, I think makes perfect sense. If we had known that 4 months ago or so when we started talking about that lot, it would have saved us a lot of energy in saying, yep, we've talked to IDOT, we know that we can do X, Y, or Z, and it will cost us this much. I think that's a good placeholder or a good position to get to while we work on these other things.
And one other question. How many parking spots will we gain from that segment of property?
I was afraid you were going to ask. I can't remember if it's 32 or 23. I've reversed that number somehow in my head, so assume 23.
We'll say Michael Jordan, 23.
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
So would the group be comfortable with us budgeting enough to continue with the engineering development, but not put in the capital budget the amounts for the actual construction?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We'll put in 25,000 related to that for that number. Thank you.
Saving money here left and right.
And Sorry, and the next item on the list are the architectural services. Update here in your board packet, you probably saw me, if you've been paying close attention to the numbers, put 100,000 in there. I know, because you'd asked earlier. The numbers came in for the proposals at 4 o'clock yesterday. I've been working my way through them today as time's allowed. The lowest cost proposals, there's 2 grouped together of the 4, are about in the $160,000 range. So that's why I've changed this number to 160,000. And just to clarify, these numbers that you'll see will be built into the budget that we talk more in depth at the March 6th meeting. So this is just our placeholders for now.
Great.
Okay.
Any questions from the board? My only thought with the libraries is this is just a really great investment in our community, and to keep it there and improve it is huge, and it's just a better asset for us as well.
So what we'll be working on between now and your March regular meeting will be looking at the proposals, making sure that we're even on what everybody's proposed, the right amounts, and then see if we can get a rough amount on what they propose that expansion to cost. Because if they come back and say, hey, it's going to cost you $20 million, you probably don't want to spend 160 on architectural services that you know you're not going to fund. So let me see if I can get a general number to start with as we move down this process so nobody gets too far down a path.
So you expect to award this contract and be able to get that kind of information before March 18th? Okay.
I'm going to try.
right,
I'm going to try to
great.
get you enough information that you can decide if you want to do. If we do award architectural services on March, the way I generally try to award these types of services is not in a lump sum. It is an hourly not to exceed, which means that if you engage them to do this service for $160,000, and we get to phase 1 and go, oh, no, that's not going to work. We stop then. We're not obligated for the full $160,000 because it's not a lump sum contract. And it protects us from overspending on an area where we stop work at a certain point.
Great.
So next page on your goals and objectives is centennial planning. As we discussed during the last meeting about this project, it is, if I understood the vision from the group correctly, is the village isn't leading this process, but we are definitely an engaged partner with other community leaders and groups. And this number is a placeholder for us to help fund mailings, distributions, graphics, et cetera, as part of this community effort.
Has anybody talked directly with the Park District about this? Because this is not the Park District Centennial Celebration, this is the Village of Northfield Centennial Celebration. So I think that number is really small, because I think we're giving back to our community and we're celebrating this community. I think that we would, and I know Trustee Ingis and Trustee Mendrick have been working on this, but that this is our baby, and we will look to other community organizations for support with it.
Well, I think that where we've gotten to on this with some thought around the fact that as a municipality, we can't raise money to fund an event like this, right? So we're looking at, is it the Parks Foundation? Those are some really preliminary conversations that Barnaby and I had, along with Chandler thinks it was helping us through this to really begin to formulate a plan. And to my knowledge, we have not engaged the school board or the park board to really discuss what this looks like as a full community, because while it is the Village of Northfield, we also know that, any place that we would want to have a celebration like this is likely to be on Park District property. Right. And is this, whatever the number is, I understand that the $3,000 seems like it's not a lot right now, but I think $3,000 gets us into some communications with all of the stakeholders in an event like that, and the opportunity to do some surveying, text surveying, emailing to the residents, the community, to find out what they're interested in. That would then get us to, okay, if we're going to make this part of the 4th of July celebration, as an example, at Clarkson Park, and we want to blow it out with a big band, or we want to have new and improved fireworks, that might be a place where we would come back to the board and say, okay, we're going to need another 10 grand or 20 grand to
Right.
take it to the next level. So I think it's a two-step process. Patrick, I think that's what you were envisioning, correct?
Well, and I was going to ask you, when you were in Kenilworth, was when Wilmette celebrated their centennial. Give you a little homework. I mean, I wonder if their city manager, or anybody from their village board would have any advice for us moving forward, and how they did it.
Yeah, quite possibly. And remember, this 3,000 from us, we may ask our partners to kick in a little bit too, so this number could be tripled as we go through.
If I could just weigh in on this. So this board, 3 years ago, I think we gave the parks, I think it was $10,000 a year. Well, no, it was 10. We raised it to 20. We doubled it. And we had a debate, a healthy debate about whether one taxing body should be giving money to another. But we kept talking about the 2040 plan. Came up again, Don. And the word vibrancy is used nonstop in there, and we said, well, the vibrancy's in the park, so let's support it. Well, I think we should support it more. So I would like to see us give like 30,000. I hate to say it, guys, but we're running out of time for a successful 100th centennial.
You have the hats printed already, don't you?
I had hats. There's a Wildbun High School up in Minnesota, and they have alumni classes, and I created an alumni class of 2026 that didn't even exist yet, and they made a bunch of hats. I thought it was fun. If we really want, but this board has been dealing with a lot of stuff, and we're going to be dealing with more stuff this year, so realistically, we're not going to be good at this. We're not going to own it. I don't mean to be pessimistic. I think there was a lot of, energy. We spent $25,000 on a study. They had great ideas. We were going to have block parties everywhere, and blocks were going to make their own flags, and we're going to have contests, and it's all there. It's on the shelf, so to speak. But I would like to see us give $30,000 to the parks with the idea that they're going to be building momentum toward this. I mean, 3,000, come on. We can do better than that. So I would like to see that number be 33,000. Scottie Pippen, let's go for it.
I think we have to engage the Park District first before we decide to go anywhere. I want to see where the vision of this is going. I agree with you, it takes a lot of time, Barnaby. I was involved in the Centennial in Kenilworth. Took a lot of time, a lot of energy, but it was a lot of volunteers. There you go. Right? It was a lot of volunteers. So it's not on the governing bodies to do this. This is the citizens' party, and they need to step up and get involved associated with it. And in fact, we charged every family $100 to be part of it, to make it successful. So it wasn't putting the burden on the village and for people that aren't going. You made it so people came, and they enjoyed, and everything was laid out for them. So I'm not saying that's the number, but I'm saying people got to buy into it too, and spend their time and energy. Can't just be, the civil servants, et cetera, doing it. Just my opinion.
Any other thoughts?
Well, I guess to Trustee Dingis's point, the line item in the budget that we give to the park, or the park board, is still coming up for discussion, right? And that's a different line item than what we're talking about here.
It's a different purpose. It may be in the same line item ultimately.
Yeah.
But it's a different reason for the money.
And so, Barnaby, is your question whether it's 10 or 20 or 30 in just that general bucket, or you're wanting 30 in addition to that bucket?
I think a lot more money is going to have to be raised for a successful centennial. And the Park Foundation, they're in the midst of their own $20 million campaign.
Yep.
Now, this might actually help them, because to raise money for their projects plus the centennial might bring in some people. So I think it's a great conversation to have with them. I know they're very focused. They've got a referendum on the ballot. I think it's going to cost the average resident like $1 a day for our parks. So I do think, to your point, Trustee Fowler, I think the citizens are willing to hopefully pay into that. But, yeah, I want to create some momentum for this. I want us to start getting excited about it and put some money behind it. And again, I thought we had a pretty exciting proposal.
did.
And I encourage people to look at it. I think it's on the website. I think there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Trustee Dingus, when did we last talk to the park board about this?
To my knowledge, we have never.
Okay, so.
Unless they're
who
listening
should-
tonight.
And I don't think this is on Patrick's hands or anybody
Yeah.
internally at staff. Who from our board should be, go ahead.
Well, I'm just going to say that I have had discussions with a couple of park board members talking about our centennial and our thoughts, but and that's it. But I'm happy to connect with, unless somebody else.
No, my wife's on the Park Board Foundation, so I can't do it. I'm conflicted out. So
I mean,
Tom, I think you're a really good choice for
I'm
this
happy to
assignment.
talk to anybody, whatever you'd like.
Well, let's get with President Longmiss, and then
Okay.
also we've got an election coming up, et cetera, but that may be initial
Right after
conversations.
that, yeah, okay.
Well, I think, again, it's got to be a collaborative effort with the religious community, with the park district, with the schools, with the business community and all the residents. And I think that'll make it a successful event with the buy-in from every, stakeholder. So I really think, and we've talked about this years ago, about having this and building this up, and Barnaby and I have had discussions about this in the past. So I think that's really the direction we have to go and start, building the momentum, like you said, Barnaby, and get the planning going, but get every stakeholder involved. And a park district, again, is a big part of that because the location, again, is going to probably have to be at Clarkson Park or Willow Park. And hopefully we can have a big event, and hopefully the weather cooperates too.
So if I can pull you back up to cruising altitude of 30,000 feet, please? What number would you like me to put in here? Nothing with,
I think leave it, in my individual opinion is leave it here. And I think if time progresses and we need to adjust, we have the ability to do so.
Yep.
And I think that is what Trustee Madrick said, increasing this, I think this is earmarked for centennial planning, whereas the line item.
I guess I would disagree a bit, simply because I don't think we want to lose sight of this. And if we don't put this as a goal and objective and put a larger sum to it, then we get to budgeting and we have the park board donation amount, and we've sort of forgotten this because we've moved on to something else. So I guess I would support the 33 number. We've certainly shaved some significant money off of this goals and objectives list. I don't think adding another 30 right now would be out of the realm of possibility, and presumably we'll have a citizens group and a committee, and not unlike Barnaby and I did when we first talked about this, to come to you, to this board, and say, okay, we had 33, this is what we want to spend the 33 on.
Dedicated solely to the centennial, and that other 20,000 line item would stay.
Yeah, because I don't want to ding our general contribution to the park board and suddenly earmark it to a centennial celebration that they haven't even bought into yet and agreed that they want to participate with us on.
Can you set it as a range for now?
I like the way you think, but no, I can't in the budget, unfortunately. Yeah.
Right.
Any other questions from the board?
And remember, just ultimately, this is a placeholder in the budget. So when you get to that point in that step 2 and you go, 30 is not the right number, you can amend the budget and change it.
So 33,000.
Yep. Understood. Let me write that down before I forget it. Next on the list is the Skokie Valley Trail design. This number looks really big, and it is, but it's because it's helping for the design work. Northfield is the lead agency, so it's from Skokie to Northbrook. So it's the total cost for that. We have grants that should cover this, that it's a net zero for the village. But let's keep on. It's finally, and hopefully Melissa will agree with me, it looks like it's finally getting to the point where we've got some good progress. We've got ComEd engaged. We're working through their most recent round of comments. And hopefully during this calendar year, we will start putting pencil to paper for exactly where this trail is going to be aligned, and getting that designed.
Knock on wood.
Hopefully. So next item on your list is the walkability through the Sidewalk Committee's recommendations. The board has previously talked about Wagner Road as being one of your higher priority projects. And this is basically a sidewalk extension from the northwest corner of Wagner and Willow up to the southern parking lot entrance for the church. That's $81,000. Next is beautification of the corridors, both Willow Road and Central Avenue. It's probably been 10 or more years since you've really invested in a lot of landscaping on Willow Road. There's a number of trees and some landscaping elements that have died. I'd like to get in and get those replaced and get that beautification going. Additionally, I think there's some improvements we can do to the Central Avenue corridors to help make that look a little bit better. So that's the number we've planned there. Your earlier draft of this goals and objectives plan had the water main and the purchase of a new ambulance in it. The more I've thought about it, it really doesn't fit in with the rest of these critters on this list. So it's in the CIP, we budgeted it, but I pulled it off this goals and objectives list.
Can I ask, you're done, you're moving on now, right?
Whenever you're ready.
Okay. So one thing that we talked about at the end of last month's meeting that I don't want to lose sight of, and it doesn't fit in any of these buckets, is when Devin Pierce came before the board and talked about the need for a safe crossing at Bosworth and Wagner Road. And, you know, it's been almost 2 years ago now that we began the process of getting the crossing on Winnetka Avenue, and your report seemed to suggest that we're almost there. So I would like us to put in a dollar number, because now we know, I think with Melissa's help and Trustee Orth and yourselves, we kind of are dialed in on what that amount is. So to put that amount in to really hear her concerns, you know, with a child with learning differences and being able to get safely to school, I would love to put in that $45,000 number or whatever placeholder we feel like we can put there, again, because I think, you know, safety and our children are our top priority here in Northfield, and I don't want to lose sight of that project.
Sure. From the last meeting, the village president sent a letter to President Preckwinkle stating that we had a resident come in, and this is something very important to the board. On behalf of the board, he'd like them to consider this. We have not seen a response from that letter yet. My normal approach would be not to budget that until you hear back from the county and see if they're willing to help fund it.
But that seems contrary to what we did on Winnetka Avenue, right? Like, we didn't have any buy-in from the county, which is probably why this is taking so long at this point.
You weren't asking for the county to help pay for it, if I remember. I wasn't here then.
Okay.
But in this case, there's a chance the county will pay for it. If you budget for the full cost, the county says, well, it's in your budget, you pay for it. So that's why I would recommend you wait. If we get positive response from the county, let me negotiate, try to get them to cover at least half if I can. And then I come to you and say, hey, we need a budget amendment. County's going to agree to pay for half. They're also interesting in the approach about they want perpetual maintenance. So if they have to go out and maintain it for anything, we pay for 100%. So whatever deal we negotiate for that crossing, we're going to be locked into for a long time. If I can get them to pay for half of it, because we weren't able to do that in the prior planned installation. I think this gives you more flexibility, but it is your budget. We'll do whatever you want.
Okay, as long as we're not losing sight of it, I think that's the most important part.
Definitely not.
And I didn't realize that President Lungmas had actually sent that letter, so this is news to me and I'm sure the rest of us, so that's good to know.
Yeah, probably my fault. I should have sent you a copy of it, but I'll make
Okay.
sure you get it.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on the goals and objectives?
The new date is March 6th, correct? Not March 3rd, as you indicated originally, because there's a zoning meeting that night?
So we'll get to that later in the presentation, but it's not the new date. The correct date is March 6th.
Right.
So yes, the PowerPoint went out with the wrong date on it. We'll come to that slide shortly. So as we get into budgeting season, I want to give you a little bit of the context that the staff looks at when we start looking at budgets, and especially me, how I try to project out both this fiscal year and future fiscal years. And often you may not think about what's happening at the national level impacting us directly. There's already been a little conversation tonight about, well, what's going to happen with grants, and does that mean that the state won't be giving us money? That trickle down from the federal level is huge, more than we generally realize on a day-to-day basis. The emergency management group is funded by federal funds for state, something I didn't even know. So there's a big impact here. And right now, I don't know that anybody could tell us what's going to be happening in the economy. I won't read through all these for you, but there's a lot of pressure there. We're watching things. Congressman Schneider had a conference earlier today that I participated in, talking about really him saying he doesn't know. It's a very different time, but it could have significant local impacts. They're hoping to know by early March whether or not the current promised funding will be filtered down to the state, but they're just gonna have to wait. Where this goes long-term, does it push us into a recession? Does it cause the inflation to go up? Does that then hit our CPI? It's developing, it's too early, but they're all things we pay attention to as we go through in the budgeting process. Because, as I said, that comes down to the state level. We belong to a group called the Illinois Municipal League. The league does a great job every year projecting what several of the state revenue sources are going to do, both on a calendar year basis and what they call a municipal fiscal year basis. So our May 1 start date versus a January 1 start date. We use that to help look at several of our large revenue sources. But we've also got to look at for federal funding. If the HAP Road project had been continuing, we would be really uncomfortable right now because you'd be looking at a multi-million-dollar project that we would be engaging services for that we don't know that we'd get the federal funds or not. So it really has a big impact on us, both programs and services. Also, what happens in the workforce in Illinois, as these grant programs come down, people working in organizations may not have a job or there may not be enough funding to keep them employed or cause them to be laying off. All that comes down to the CPI pressure, Consumer Price Index, which is a little bit of a double-edged sword for us. High CPI years sound great because our ability to adjust our revenues goes up by that CPI number. But that CPI number also means that the cost of buying things has gone up. So really, it's more expensive to do business. It's more expensive for all of our residents. Yes, we get more revenue from taxes, but it's not good because it means it's costing people too much. And I think that's why you see the federal government looking at a 2% annual increase in inflation as a target number to keep things reasonable. So all that is my long-winded way of saying it's really important for us to look at what's happening for our budget as we project out the future. And this slide shows you some of the really big pressure points that I see on our revenues. First, our current fiscal year, right now, and I haven't looked at the most recent month because it isn't available yet, we're probably going to be in the ballpark to $300,000 to $400,000 under projected revenue. So majority of that comes through sales taxes, not hitting target. That's showing on both a state level and local level. So it isn't just bad projections here, it's actually happening everywhere. The Illinois Municipal League and the state have been missing those targets. Local Government Distributive Fund is the state's way of shipping or extending revenues to localities when they lost the ability to tax corporations and other businesses. The LGDF had been, the state made an error in the distribution and they overpaid localities. I can't remember the number, but it may have started with a B. Super large amount of money. And so they've been clawing that money back by significant reductions to the LGDF. Additionally, and this is part of the reason President Ugmas is in Springfield, is negotiating to get our percentage of LGDF back up to 10%. Because the state, I'll use the term rated it, because that's the way it's commonly referred to as, but the state needed that revenue, said, sorry, communities, we're taking away from you. They took it down, we're trying to get it back to where it used to be. So IML projects we may see a 3.2% increase in LGDF. The next category under percentage of budget, tells you of all the village's revenue sources, LGDF is 6.5%. It's 949,000 for the fiscal year 2025. It's a big number for us. Use tax is taxes on items like if you bought a car in Wisconsin and brought it in the state, you pay extra tax on that because you should have paid local state tax on it. That number for us is a little bit less. Motor fuel tax is not a general fund revenue source, but I wanted to list it for you anyway. That's based on a percentage base. We're seeing drop-offs in that. Is it electric vehicles? Is it people not driving as much? Is it the economy hurting people, so not taking as many trips? We don't know, but IML projects that that number is going to drop for revenue. Transportation Renewal Fund is almost just like the motor fuel tax revenue, but it's a different category that the state put in to give us additional funds to do road repairs. So when you see transportation renewal, think motor fuel tax, MFT, because we have to spend the money in the same way. Cannabis tax. Often when you look at this, you think, oh, great, this is block. No, this is actually statewide, the distribution to localities for the tax on cannabis. So for example, when I was in Kenilworth, we did not have a distribution center in Kenilworth. Kenilworth got cannabis tax. Our use tax coming from block, our tax coming from block for sales tax actually goes into the use tax category. So that's where that would go. Our estimate of when they would start bringing in revenue versus when it actually happened was off, and that's part of our reduction in use tax revenue for this year's estimate. And additionally, PPRT, personal property replacement tax. That is a tax the state imposes, if I remember correctly, in lieu of our ability to charge a local income tax. The PPRT has been dropping. IML has had some off estimates here. Numbers haven't hit target, and we'll see a very slight increase projection on the budget. And the last item on the list, as we've talked a little bit about tonight, is Mariano's. I can't tell you exactly what the numbers are for that store, but in general, in the category for us, for the taxes that would come from a grocery store use, and we've got multiple tax levels there. If Mariano's disappeared at May 1, our annual impact would be about $325,000 to $350,000 in revenue. Right now, as we're building next year's budget, we're looking at sometime, I will hope they make it to fall, but maybe late summer, the revenue starting to taper off as they start to struggle a little bit more to staff and have issues there. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but there's a very strong likelihood that once they go dark, by the time a new lease starts, a new lease is more than likely going to want to refresh that building. That refresh is going to take design, permitting, hiring contractors, and then construction. We may see that building dark for about a year, depending on what the new use is and what they want to do with that building. So as Kathleen and I work on revenue estimates for next year, we're factoring that on a month-by-month basis by average when we think it'll taper and when we think it'll come back on the books. So this will hit fiscal year 26, which is May 1, 2025 through April 30th, 2026, and possibly into 26. But we'll know more once Steve has somebody come to him with an absolutely fantastic lease concept for that building, which hopefully we'll see.
Tomorrow?
That would be the hopeful. The part of me that goes, is thinking it will probably be 4 to 5 months before we see much, because what's going to happen is somebody's going to get proposals out, they're going to work through it, they're going to want to be really quiet about it so no one blows the information out and gets it out too early, and then they're going to come to us with a partially baked pie and say, what do you guys think? And we may hear things early about, what do you think of this concept, or could you consider this? Some of that we won't be able to share because we don't want to break that relationship, but we're probably looking at multiple months before anything public gets out announced. So the reason I went into this long-winded explanation of our budget is so you understand, as we're putting this together, what the pressures are for us on revenues. And in the budget hearing, you'll hear me come back through this a little bit to kind of reset the context or the tone on it. So what I call budget pressure points, as we're looking both short-term and midterm, what do we see as stressors for our budget? The revenue shortfall I've talked about, Mariano's I talked about, police pension expenses. Every year, about in April or March or April, if I'm right, Kathleen, the actuary gives us an estimate of what we should be putting in for that calendar year in the police pension fund. So, catch that, I said it right. In March, we find out what we should have been paying as of January. So we've got some catch-up to do on that, and we make estimates in the budget, but the estimate for this year went up $135,000. That was much more than what we anticipated. We're also hiring 4 brand-new police officers who are brand new in their career that will hit the next actuarial assumption. The actuary is going to go, young man or woman, day one, long-term on our pensions, so I anticipate our pension obligations are going to go up even higher next year. What's good is the chief and his team have been able to get some lateral transfers. Some of those people have selected to go to the 401A, which has reduced some of that pressure, but that's still a big concern for us. HAP Road, we talked a little bit about tonight. Library expansion, we've talked about. HAP will be continuing in 2024 months. Skokie Valley Trail, not so much a budget pressure, but initially we've got to fund that until we get the reimbursements, and hopefully what we funded we will definitely get reimbursed for. And as we look out into the, I think it's 3 years ahead, Chief, a new fire engine squad for the fire department is going to be over $1 million. We've been setting aside some money for it, but the fire rescue squad is coming. Sorry, I know you're probably already tired of hearing from me. So the next is Chief Nystrom puts together an absolutely amazing spreadsheet, very colorful and actually very informative, that looks out current fiscal year and 5 years in advance. What equipment do we have? When does it need to be replaced? What condition is it? Where's it going? How's it used? It is a huge amount of information in a couple of Excel spreadsheets. I've taken the information for fiscal year 2026 after the whole team's gotten together to talk about what do we really need and trying to balance those numbers out. So I assume you've looked through this in the budget, and I don't want to go too long because we've still got HAP Road to discuss. So anything on this list that causes anybody concern or you would prefer not to see on the capital projects list? Okay, thank you. Next, road and bridge projects you see listed there. Pretty basic stuff, often things that are cyclic that happen from time to time, nothing that I would call special. We'll update this to pull out the $262,000 for the HAP Road evaluation per the board's discussion tonight.
What about the parking lot? I thought we discussed just the 25,000 engineering.
Yes.
Okay.
So we'll thank you. We'll
Sorry.
true up this list based on the discussions tonight.
Great.
So I mentioned the spreadsheets. This is a snippet from that spreadsheet that shows the summaries by area. One of the things I look for, you look at the next to the last line, totals by fiscal year. I work really hard, and Chief Nystrom works really hard at trying to level that out as much as we can, because big peaks year to year cause budget issues. So if we can level that and keep it fairly consistent, it works really well for the village and also helps us work at setting aside funds. This village does a better job than most I'm familiar with about looking at what our capital needs are and trying to set aside money every year to come close to funding our full needs. A number of other towns go, oh, great, we're going to come up with $2.5 million because we don't have it set aside. Northfield has for a long time been setting that money aside that we keep a fund balance anticipating these expenditures. So I applaud you for that work. So a separate portion of this, we looked at capital, which is roads, bridges, things like this. There's another spreadsheet, actually 2 more spreadsheets. One is equipment, so like backhoes, and vehicles, what I call rolling stock. This is a replacement plan for those. Equipment includes information technology. So there's a line item there for $133,000. The list underneath it is what we anticipate spending to reach that 133. The police department has been long time asking for security camera upgrades, as I understand it. So this is the list that we have. Any concerns with what you see on that list? Thank you. This goes into page 2 with fire rescue equipment. As we mentioned previously when we were talking about the budget, we're anticipating an ambulance. It'll be interesting once we sign the order for it, when it actually comes in. We're hoping it comes in soon after order, but it may take a year or two. And we'll adjust the budget accordingly if it's delayed. So this same summary sheet shows us lined out. There's a big spike in 26, 27. That spike is in relation to the fire rescue squad that I mentioned earlier.
Well, and I think just to put in perspective for the community, and Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, but the squad that we are going to replace pre-COVID was about 650,000 to 700,000, and they're over almost $1.5 million now. So, and production time was 1.5 to 2 years to almost 4. Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so that's what we have for the capital portion of the budget and the kind of precursor to that. Where we're moving from there, we continue to refine the budget fiscal year-end projections. That's FYE is fiscal year-end. We're working on the 26 budget. We'll be ready for the March 6th date. So for those of you that looked at the PowerPoint presentation that was in the packet, it is not March 3rd. The zoning board would probably appreciate you coming to watch their meeting because they will be, is it zoning board or no? Plan and zoning. Plan and zoning commission would appreciate the company, but we'll be talking about budget on March 6th. And then if the board needs to talk about it before the 18th, has significant changes, you can schedule, I think, March 13th, we have as a placeholder for another budget discussion. If not, the hearing and possible adoption could be on the 18th.
Can you just, again, for the residents, and now that we have online viewing, just explain the budget workshop? I mean, we often have no one sitting in the meeting. So I would love residents to understand what it is that's happening there and why it's important for them to be engaged.
Sure. So every year, the village manager works to prepare a proposed budget. And that budget, as you've seen, starts with the goals and objectives, and we build in, as a team, the funds we think we need to be able to provide the core and enhanced services that you've asked us to provide. And just a quick discussion of core enhanced. Core services are those things that we exist for, that residents cannot easily get for themselves. For example, police protection, fire suppression services. That's a core service provided by the village. An enhanced service is something that over time the village has said, we should be doing this, or we can do this more efficiently, or you know what, we've got the ability to do it, so let's do it for our residents. An example is sidewalk cleaning. Residents could clean their own sidewalks, but the village board has said, you know what, we want to go through for the schools, students, and everybody else, we're going to clear the sidewalks. That's an enhanced service. So we build all that into, you'll sometimes hear programmatic budgeting. We look at what services we need to provide, budget that out, look at the revenues that we anticipate through projection, and present you, hopefully every year, with a balanced budget. And that's definitely my goal, is it's balanced. Now, at the end of the year, if we have a surplus, I may come to you and say, you know what, we did better than we thought. We've got $100,000. Let's transfer an additional $100,000 to the police pension plan or IMRF plan. But the initial, what we call a structurally balanced budget, should be every single year you have enough revenues to account for the expenditures you have to have, except for those one-time expenditures, like a fire engine. At that meeting, we'll be presenting the information, the department heads will be here, and the board will go through and say, why do you have this number here? And it's really working back and forth through that, why this number changed so much from last year. So the board fully understands what authority you're giving us by adopting that budget, because that'll be our game plan for the next year. Unless, of course, you come back and amend it because you decide the park district should have more than $30,000 for the centennial planning. And we can do that easily.
Thank you. And this has been an excellent presentation, so I appreciate all the work you've put into it.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the board regarding this? Any questions or comments from the community?
Pamela Papadatos. I'm the owner of Metamorphosis Spa here in Northfield. I have a question about the public parking. Are we talking about the lot behind Friedman's property? Is that the same one, the IDOT property? Or are we talking a little bit to the east behind Stormy's?
Two, actually. One is the lot behind Stormy's that is kind of full of trees and
Are you talking about the
vegetation.
county property that, it's, okay, on the,
Yep.
okay, so that's
Yeah.
one. Are we also talking about the IDOT property that's just north of Friedman's where, let's say, Taconano is?
No, it's actually the section, we're talking about the piece right in behind Stormy's. That kind of comes out almost like a little bit of a comma in behind Taco Nano, in through that whole area, until it gets to the vacant lot, which is the Byline Bank property. This is not for Byline Bank, but we also, the second piece is we have some spots on Walnut across from the police department where there's a expanded area of grass and
Okay,
a tree
so-
that we could get extra parking
Thank you.
there.
So it's the same property that we had talked about before of adding additional parking?
Exactly.
My question remains, what would be, how would resident or customers enter and exit? Because between my property and Friedman's property, there's a very narrow thoroughway there. So how would they enter and exit, cars and pedestrians?
The design plans I've seen show that the alley directly east of your property being the access to that parking lot.
Okay, that is too narrow for the cars to come through and to have pedestrians walk through. And I know we've walked through this before, so I'm still confused on how that's even a consideration.
Well, apparently, based on the discussion tonight, we'll at least get to the lease portion to see if we could use that property. Once we get that, there'll be more discussion about the design and the ability to move pedestrians as well as cars through that alleyway. I've been there with you. It is, tends to be a little narrow.
And then who would be responsible for snow removal?
Almost certainly the village.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Go ahead. Or comments, I should say.
Lucy Callahan, Peachtree Place in the Village. I just want to say that I think that is a very awkward parking area with the kind of weather we have in Illinois. Who is going to want to walk from behind there to get to Pam's, or unless they're going to the building right in front of them? I just think it's a little bit awkward. And so I think it's a great idea that you kind of think about it as you decided to do. Thank you.
Thank you. It's 7 o'clock. Can we take a recess from this and re-adjourn in 5 minutes, finish the last part, and then do the village board meeting once we have completed item number 5 on the agenda?
Yes, the village board meeting can start later than
Right.
7 once this
So
runs
would I
into-
entertain a motion then to take a recess?
To a recess for 5 minutes, and then we
So-
reconvene.
Motion for a 5-minute recess, then to adjourn and then come back for the rest of the committee, the whole meeting.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And is it a motion, Mallory, or is it just a reconvene? All right. Thank you. We are going to reconvene. I'd like a motion to reconvene the Tuesday, February 18th Committee of the Whole.
Motion to
at-
begin the second half of the COW?
At 7:11. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. So moving on to the last item on the agenda is the continued discussion on the Hap Road Improvement Project. Patrick, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. It'd be helpful for me to know how much, there's a lot to go through on this PowerPoint. If you read the agenda packet, and I'm sure everybody did, at least of the board, there are a number of questions for you to work through. How much time would you like to spend on that tonight? Because ideally, we could bookend it to know when you want that discussion stopped and get into the regular board meeting.
My opinion is I think there's been a pretty healthy discussion so far with the board. I know that there was some questions and comments from the public. I think that if we have the ability to obviously put thought into the discussion here, I would say I want to give everybody who's here who wants to make a public comment the opportunity. But I think that if we go 45 minutes, and if we're done sooner than that, I think that would be reasonable. But I know we've heard several public comments already regarding the Hap Road project. So, I think if you want to start with your presentation and questions from the board, and then we'll move to public comment.
Very good.
Thank you.
So the discussion tonight is really kind of laid out in the same process that you saw the board item written, is stepping you through decision points and trying to move this project forward and making logical decisions that kind of build into each other. It's my idea of how best to run this forward. At the time I put this together, I thought we'd have about 45 minutes, and you've got it just about right for we'll be back. Anything we can't finish tonight, we'll come back to in the near future. So one of the first decision points for the board for my recommendation is the primary elements of this reevaluation. Reevaluation is a long word, but I want to make sure it means the same thing to everybody. So in your mind, the reevaluation of this project, to me, is these elements based on what I've heard from this group. As you read through those, do you agree with that summary of what this is?
Generally, yes.
So, and that is, it's generally a high level. We're going to form an evaluation group. That group's going to have goals. We're going to engage the public very strongly in this process. There's going to be a timeline for the whole project. And in that timeline, there are going to be key steps if this project comes back to the village board to say, yes, we agree with that, group, move forward. Yes, we agree with that, move forward. And then, as we talked a little bit tonight, you may or may not engage a consulting design engineer. I will tell you at some point you're going to need to. An architect, a landscape designer, other professionals who are not civil engineers are not going to be able to draw plans up to go forward to Cook County and IDOT to see if the project can be built, and then do a project development report, which is required for the grant process. So it'll happen at some point. It's totally up to this group when you get there and when you want to. So anything you think I missed in putting this bullet list together?
Is the list, sorry, is the list in order? Because I would argue that, and it was brought up again tonight, that we need to figure out what the goal of the group is before we can figure out how to formulate the group. So if this isn't in a step-by-step process, I'm great. Otherwise, I would suggest that this board needs to evaluate what the goals would be for the committee in our view, and then engage the committee and get their buy-in on those goals or their evaluation of those goals first before anything else happens.
It was in order, but I think that the way I envision it is exactly what you're thinking, if that makes any sense. And that is, as we go through these questions, does the board want to give any advice to the group of what the project goals could be? But you charge the group with going out and setting the project goals, making a recommendation, and bringing it back to the board. So that would happen after the group is formed, but it would be truly set the goals for the project, report back to the board adopts them or blesses them and sends them back on their next task.
What's going to be the group formation evaluation guideline, so to speak? So who are we going to pick or choose, or who's going to be the one that decides who's on this group, like from the business community, the Hap Road residents? How is that going to be formulated? Because
We will be getting there shortly.
Okay.
Yep, that's all part of the presentation for tonight.
So your question right now is there anything missing, or are we happy with?
Yes. And what you're going to find me doing is stepping you through this in a methodical, slow path, checking in at each step to make sure we're all in agreement. So none of us kind of get sideways and everybody's under the same understanding. So it may seem like a little bit of overkill at first, but I think at the end, putting this time in will make sure that this constituted board is all in agreement about what the path is. And that will be so fundamental to helping the evaluation group know that we have clear direction. This is where we're supposed to be going.
One, and maybe this is a little hybrid, but, you know, there could be the group form, comes up with objectives, comes to the board could give ideas, but we could also have a couple of board members, you know, post-election, there might be a couple of board members who could work with the group. We certainly have precedent for board members, you know, I think the library is one where, you know, we have a couple of board members working on a project, so they can essentially communicate back to the board. So I think that might help move the process along as
And
well.
we'll get to discussing who's on the group very shortly. Again, that's back to my methodically slow decision point before we move to the next one. I'm seeing some wrinkled noses and some heads nodding, so.
Well, I guess my struggle is for some of us sitting on this board, we're in limbo. A lot's going to potentially change. And the new board may have things that, I guess my point is, do we really want to have this discussion tonight? I mean, I still want to hear what the public has to say and their thoughts about what we've already discussed prior in the committee of the whole. But I feel like we're having a discussion with engagement from this whole board, this condensed or whatever you call the board. And if that's going to change, and I hate to say this, but are we kind of wasting our time tonight if other people have other ideas that aren't sitting at the table right now?
So you essentially have March, April, and May meeting is when the new members are seated.
Right.
That often isn't a very meaty meeting. So you have 2 more meetings essentially to work through items. It is a good question for the group to say, do we want to engage this? Or do we want to pause this until the newly constituted board is seated, which would probably mean their first opportunity to be in June?
Trustee Fowler, if you have something, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a problem going through this tonight, and I'd actually like to go through Patrick's thinking behind this.
Okay.
Because I think that would be useful for us, regardless who's left, and the public to see where it is, and we can tweak it from there.
Okay.
And figure it out. The timing, that, we can decide that after we look at this. I understand your point, I don't disagree with you necessarily. I think there's some challenges.
It was the piece of
And we're still waiting.
putting people in places where I don't.
And, you know, honestly, the county hasn't gotten back to us yet either. So are we jumping in front of, there are a lot of unknowns because the county hasn't gotten back to us. So I'd like to understand what Patrick's thinking, the timing of which is flexible, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And just so you know, I did not anticipate the discussion tonight going into who, no names. It's more of high-level concepts of how you'd like this formed.
Well, I agree with Todd. I think the public wants to know kind of direction that you're thinking of and that the board that's seated currently is thinking of. So I think that it's good to go through it, and then they can get some ideas and maybe have some input as well.
Well, your input will help us refine it, so depending on where we go, we'll be ready for the next steps.
So just a sort of a threshold point, I think the goal of the group should be to evaluate Hap Road. I don't think the board should be having any more goals other than that. And I think that the group should be formed with just that one goal, and they can take it in whatever direction they see fit. Barnaby had an idea potentially about the village taking over the road. I mean, that should be in the universe of thoughts. I mean, potentially maybe doing nothing should be in the universe of thoughts, and I think anywhere on that spectrum. So I think the only goal that we should set is that the committee should evaluate Hap Road, and the committee should be formed, and they should go and they should check in periodically with us. That's the way I see it. When we did the sidewalk committee, which is not exactly the same, but that was the charge. It was to evaluate the sidewalks, and then we met, and there wasn't any other sort of goals imposed upon us. And the committee met, and they decided how they wanted to evaluate sidewalks, and I think the group worked out real well, and I think it should be the same thing for this. So in terms of how we set this up, it should be the formation of the evaluation group. That should be the first thing.
I agree. I think we have the formation of the evaluation group, but I think the other thing we talked about earlier is that we can give Patrick direction to talk to the county about right away, whatever we have to do to reduce the speed limit on that road. I mean, that's something we can do now, whether we own it or not. And I know that you can write a letter, or the village president, and you can formulate a letter to the county that states that we want to reduce the speed limit on Hap Road. That's something we can do. And when we talk about safety and everything else, that's an area that we can really work on now and get that accomplished.
So that's a tangential topic. Does the board want to discuss that now, or do you want to put that on the side of, if there's a consensus of this group, for the village president to send a letter to the county asking for consideration of reducing the speed, you can do that at any point, and unless Mallory slaps me upside the head, it does not have to be on the agenda because it's not final action. It's just a direction from the board. If you want to have that conversation now, we can. If you want to keep moving forward with this as we are, we can do that. I'm here at your pleasure.
I don't know that it's much of a conversation. It's another data point that this group should have in moving forward. In my view, it's a separate issue from reevaluating Hap Road, because if we can get the speed limit reduced tomorrow, that really has no impact on what this group does from there. It's a great opportunity, and then we'll know from a safety perspective that we already have a lower speed limit. So if that's something that we can do, we should consider it.
It's a separate issue, but, you know, whether we talk about it now or at the regular board meeting, I think it's something we need to talk about, because it is a topic of great concern to all the residents, especially that live on that corridor. So
what are you asking for? Are you asking for us to go around the room and say whether we want to ask?
I'm asking
I'm
asking for if we could, either at this part of the meeting, after this part that we go through Hap Road, or at the board meeting, set an opinion, or if we all go around the room and say, yes, we want to do this, and give Patrick and the village president the direction to contact the county and try to see what we need to do to reduce the speed limit on Hap Road as soon as possible.
I think, Charlie, I think generally anybody here would agree. However, we haven't heard back from the county. I think this is a delicate time for us to be talking to the county. And so I think we have to be playing chess, not checkers, and going out and asking these things. So I'd rather find out from Patrick talking to the county. Let's see where the trade winds are.
Right, but we got to give Patrick that direction as a board. And so he can't take that upon himself to just do that. So my point is that we give him that direction, and when he can, interject that into the conversation about Hap Road. And again, it doesn't cost anything to do that. And when the county said we want to do the roundabout, or we want to do these improvements to improve safety, what's one of the number one things you can do to improve safety is reduce speed on a road. We did it with Willow Road when we were in negotiations with them on how the road was going to end up.
That was part of the negotiation.
Right.
They didn't
So-
reduce it
Right.
prior to the construction. It was
No, but it's
because
something
of.
we can do now that costs nothing.
I'd
and
rather
it's-
stay on. I
That's fine,
understand
I'm
what
just
you're
saying.
Yeah.
Let's get back to what's on the agenda right now, which is discussing the plan for reevaluating capital. And with this presentation and what you have provided is, I've heard already that we want to hear what you have to say. So I would ask you to please proceed.
Okay. So in this list, as I look at a big project, a big planning project, and I've been involved in a few, these are, in my opinion, the primary elements that we need to be able to move you forward in a planning process. But I also recognize I've only been here 9 or 10 months, and a lot happened in the 10 years before I got here. So if I'm missing something in this process, let me know, and this isn't just a one-shot opportunity at it, but it's my way of getting it in your head that you go, oh, you know what, we should look at this also as part of the primary or key elements of the reevaluation. So I wasn't hearing a lot of, no, this, we don't like this, so let me just move to the next question, unless there's an objection. So, group objectives. The board can either just send a planning group out and say, go forth and come up with goals, or you can give the group some guardrails of, here's what we'd like you to look at. The reason I put in the goals of the prior group were so you would know what 10 years ago that group came up with. I honestly can't remember right now whether the group, I think they formed these on their own and came back to the village board. I don't think they were injected with any concepts. It was just their work. But I think it informs you of where their thinking was at that point. So do you want to give the group some goals direction? Do you want to provide the prior goals? What's your thinking?
I think the way, it's a way scaled down in like little microcosms of the big picture, but the way the sidewalk committee worked so well. Because you did have so many different people from so many different areas. You know, you had people who live on Latrobe looking at sidewalks on Sunset Ridge, so you bring a different eye to it. I think that the way that group worked was great, but I also think that the group sat down and worked together in forming their objectives and what they thought. And I think the public that's here who made comments in the past, I mean, these are people who are important to be a part of this. And the people who had issues with the sidewalks were the people who walk the sidewalks all the time, and that's how Trustee Gallon and myself picked them, was because they would come and complain to us about this needs to be fixed. So I think that we can help with objectives, but I think the group coming up with some of their own objectives too is key. So I think it has to be fluid, if that makes sense to you. And I mean, it's a huge project to undertake, but I think it takes a village, and the way the sidewalk committee worked really well.
Maybe it's a huge project, maybe it's not. Like, I mean, I think we can't make any assumptions about what we think we want. Like, let the group decide. Like I said, the only goal that we should impose is go out and evaluate Hap Road. That's it. That's
I
the
guess
only goal, I think.
And again, I think the sidewalk is a good analogy, but the sidewalk committee, it did good work, but it was very kind of incremental. Like, it identified weaknesses in the system and made suggestions. I guess what I'm hoping for, and again, it goes back to the steering committee in November of 2016, where they weren't just evaluating. They asked the steering committee their desired goals. And they mentioned things like promote Northfield as a tree city, bike paths, charming, downtown, make it charming. There were all the farmers markets. So there was a vision. So to me, it's not just an evaluation, it's a re-envisioning. And I think an evaluation, you know, it'd be like you take your car in and the mechanic says, hey, you need X, Y, and Z. Maybe we need a slightly different kind of car. So, Matt, I agree with you. It might be nothing, like this group might just say, hey, listen, we like Hap Road the way it is, we want some benches. It might be something simple, but I want to challenge the group to use their vision of what they'd like to see. And, you know, realistically, because they did it before, and I think that's a great way to start. So I would call it sort of re-evaluation and re-envisioning.
Agreed.
Okay.
Agreed, totally agree.
Okay.
Sorry, I honestly don't know where you are on this.
I think where we are is that we're going to let the committee figure out what the goals of the project are, correct? Yes.
Excellent, thank you.
No direction, and let them start from scratch and come up with the ideas.
You said that so concisely, I don't know how I missed it. Thank you. Okay, here comes the big question. There are a couple ways to do something like this. Occasionally, towns will set up a steering committee, a blue ribbon committee. They may call it a bunch of different things. Or they decide that it's a project of a situation that it's best for the village as a committee of the whole to work through it. So in my mind, this is one of the big decision points for you, or stepping into a big decision of how do you want this structured, this evaluation, re-envisioning group structured? And those are the two common approaches that I've listed here in the board packet.
Without a doubt, it needs to be a steering committee of residents.
Absolutely.
Nice. Moving quickly.
Trustee Fowler? That's good.
Well, the residents and the business community, because they're the ones that are impacted as well.
So I think you're talking about who should be on it.
Yes.
Versus what the structure should be.
Right.
The structure is a steering committee. So now, how do you want to do that? And before we get into the harder question about who, I'm going to ask you first, how big do you want it to be?
15.
I would tell you organizationally, you generally target, the rule they say is 7 plus or minus 2 for an effective group. Now,
13.
Now, where that may change is a group like this, where you're looking for input from a wide variety of people. You may want a bigger group. And sometimes that bigger steering committee group gets broken into subcommittees. And you can't do that if you've got a really small group. So you want it big enough to get a lot of opinions in, but you don't want it so big that you can't get anything done in a meeting.
And the sidewalk committee was 13, and it worked really well, so plus or minus.
Yeah, right.
Well, and there's times when certain people can't make it as well. So like what Matt said, I think 15's a good number to start, because you may have some people that may drop out as well, and then you have to get more people back in. So I think that 15's a decent number.
13 to 15.
Okay. Okay, now we get a little bit into the more meat of this. What stakeholders would you like represented in this group of 15-ish?
I can give my personal opinion is I think that we could probably snap our fingers right now, and this whole group would organize into the Hap Road. But I mean, I think that there's plenty of interest from everybody. I think if we're going to have a committee, there should be 2 trustees on it, which Matt and I did. And we did have, they were scheduled, published meetings. So, but I think that helps take the burden off of each other if one can't be there for another commitment. But I think residents and business owners, you've got, 2 people from the board. And I think that whether we know it or not, there's a pretty well-established steering committee that's already working on thoughts and ideas. And, we've had people who have offered. I think that's a great place to start. And then someone's going to say they recommend somebody else. I think it'll fill itself pretty easily. Thoughts?
I absolutely agree that we need to have residents, we need to have businesses, and I also think that we have to have some geographic diversity as well, because the people that live on Hap Road have a vested interest in the project, but we have many other residents who use Hap Road, who go to Loyola or New Trier, who are just as vested in the road as well. So having some geographic diversity along with just general buckets of people is important.
Great, I think, I agree.
Agreed.
Agree. Great.
So if we generally looked at the stakeholders list, we've got HAP residents, skip over the businesses for just a second, and residents. So there's some of your geographic.
Right.
If you took all of these and had 2 from each of these groups, 2 from the HAP residents, go down to a board commission representative, you could have 2 from one of your boards and commissions, it kind of doesn't matter where, 2 trustees. That gets you 13, if I counted correctly, skipping the special experience category.
Well, I think that, again, the Hap Road Committee that's worked so hard on this had an architect who stood at this meeting and offered to do pro bono work for this project. So in your special experience category, maybe that's a category you need to fill. You need to say, we need an architect. I would suggest that in the interest of business, you need someone who understands the commercial real estate market and can help us figure out how this valuable road that goes through our town impacts our current businesses. We know because they're going to be sitting on the committee, but future development or future interest in our community, which is important to all residents, right? We want to have another restaurant. We want to have the ice cream shop that we've all mentioned. So having someone with that bucket of experience, I think there is a lot to be said for someone in the community that can provide this input for us as well.
So roughly 2 people from each of these groups you see on the slide. We'll start with that and see what we get category-wise and response-wise.
I mean, I know, sorry, I interrupted someone,
I
but
just
some,
wanted to say with even though it is a narrow grab of people in a group, which I'm sure you could have 100 on, I think that the key to the whole success of this is going to be the communication process so that everybody knows what's going on. And there will be meetings with posted agendas, so if a business owner's not actually sitting on, they'll still know that there's a meeting and they can come and talk.
Right.
Agreed. I was just going to say, some of these are just overlapping. You know, you could have someone on a board and commission that has one of the professional expertises you're looking for. So, I think you want to generally have this kind of stuff, but I don't think you want to be like so focused that I think you want to get a nice representation and not be so hyper-focused on any one particular professional trait, because I think you're going to get a lot of overlap.
The reason I went through in the order I did with this is so what was mentioned about getting representation from different areas. I wanted you to think about the stakeholders of who you wanted represented. Before anybody gets too locked in, it should be this person, this person, this person. So you get that. And when we get the names in, we can start to figure out what categories they fit. And maybe you have 2 people that's like, well, you know what, we're going to pick this person over that because this person's already part of this category.
And I think there could be some self-selection, because if you, like I would put Alicia Bilar at the top of the list of Hap Road residents. She's been so intimately involved in this. But that said, that group should say, well, these are the people that we want of the, whatever the number of people that have been involved, these are the 2 residents that we want. Likewise with the businesses, we have ways to communicate with our local businesses to be able to say, this is a committee we're forming, we'd like to have 2 representatives, and please provide input as to who that should be.
Yeah. So let me skip over the next bullet about the chair and go right to that last bullet. It's close to what I was thinking is once we have this outlined, we can form an outreach. We've got a Hap Road resident email. We've got, Melissa does a great job with our electronic newsletter. Say we are seeking people who would like to serve on this group. Send us your name, why you'd like to be on the group, and if you have any specialization related to it. Get that in and start circling that down and let this group pick. And maybe the Hap Road residents say, you know what, we'd like these 2 residents to be representing us in this category, and they send that note in to us, and we filter it to the board. So that would be one way to go through this and help select your members for your representation.
I like that, but we did skip over. I do think it's important that this group has real power, authority, and feel like they have some autonomy. And so I think it will be important that they perhaps do select their own leader, because if we're going to ask these people to put in all this time and effort, I think they want to feel like, yeah, I think it'll help us get higher caliber participants if we approach it that way.
Sure, and I wasn't skipping that totally. I was just going to the next item because it just flowed with the conversation. So are you comfortable with that approach for how we find the
I
members?
think that's a great idea, Barnaby, that they should pick who they lead, not us.
Okay. So circling back to that next to the last bullet point, consensus on the chair of the group, of how that's selected.
They should self-select. I mean, you organize the group, and not unlike, jury duty, you decide who the lead is, so.
Well, hopefully it's a little bit more pleasant than being a jury foreman. Okay. Sorry, I was taking some notes here to make sure I keep it going. So I mentioned the prior steering committee goals, and this looks like a repeat of what I was mentioning earlier, but we've already decided we prefer not to give them any direction, see what they come back with, and take that forward.
Oh.
There's a lot there, and it's in your board packet with more information, but what I did is I wanted to have an idea as we started to look at potentially having somebody help us with this process of how many meetings might there be and what should the group be looking at each meeting. So I've spent a fair amount of time looking at how it should flow to help get the group healthy and moving through a discussion point. So as I said, it's more visible in your board packet, but as you read that, did you see that I missed any big decision points on what the group should generally be working for? And at the end of the day, this group will be running their own meetings. This will be just a recommendation to help get them started, because I don't know the experience of the group yet of who's going to have been through this before to figure out how to move it forward. So I'd like to give them some ideas to work at, pick on, and decide what they want to do.
I guess my only comment from what you have presented up here is through 2 meetings, you aren't going to get, I don't believe, to a discussion of roadway alignment concepts as prepared by an engineer. And so it seems like I don't want to put a number on it, but it seems like there's going to be 6 or 8 meetings before the group coalesces around any specific idea, where they would then make a presentation and we would proceed to an engineering step. So I guess I'm saying it's not going to be 2 meetings unless I'm misunderstanding what you've written up here. I don't think you can ask this group to complete this task in 2 meetings.
I think it's a great outline, but I don't think you can put a criteria that you have to have XYZ done at meeting 1, XYZ at meeting 2. It's a great outline, and these are bullet points that they can use in putting it together, but I don't think you want to put that onus on them that they have to get this done in these meetings. If it takes more meetings, it takes longer. Again, that was the problem in the past. They try to rush through this. I don't think anyone's in a hurry to rush through this. It's not like the road is collapsing. It's not like, and there's some people out there that say, leave it alone. It's perfectly fine the way it is. Just fix the speed and fix, maybe curb and gutter in the sidewalk and fix the traffic intersection, with the lights. So I think it's a great outline, but I don't think you should make them feel like they have to do these in this time frame.
It's a suggestion.
It does say, it says potential. It says potential.
It says Patrick meeting outline on the top. That's potential.
No, I get it. I think, as you guys said, the steering committee is going to make the decision. This is just something, Patrick, is useful for them to think about when they're coming together. Yeah.
There was no set.
Right.
You must do this, it all flowed in one flow.
Organically.
Organically is right. All right.
No, and to be clear, the longer I'm here, the more I learn about your history. I get their sensitivity around how things may have been done in the past, and the feeling that somebody just overmanaged what was going to be the outcome from the group. The way this is set up in my mind is setting them up to succeed, but letting them move down the path on their own pace, speed, but also not letting them be stuck in the wind because they don't know where to go next. So my management style, while you hear me talk a lot here, is really to give you concepts, ideas, but it's your decision how these things go. If I'm involved with this steering committee, it'll be the same thing with them. My style is not to say, this is the way it shall be. It is, here's some things to consider, what would you like to do?
Okay, so you made one point, staff participation, and I don't think I saw a staff member on your list, and you guys had
not voting
Steve.
then. They wouldn't be able to
Well, but you had Steve Gutierrez as part of your committee.
You did, and Lila.
Okay, so you would slot those people in, Patrick?
There will be support people around, but they will not, as you said, they will not be members of the group that would vote. We're just there for support. And more than likely, unless you prefer that I'm not, it'll be me representing our staff. Hey. Okay. Comfortable here so far? Okay, I mentioned earlier, there's some key points at which I think would be helpful for the group's work to come back to the village board as kind of a check-in milestone. So these are the 4 areas that I thought would be most helpful. There may be more as this goes, but these are the ones that are most obvious for me to start with. And that is, the board wants to approve the project goals, I would assume. The engagement strategy, this group will be helping develop that. It's probably going to have a financial cost to it, so it would be good to come back to the board for review and make sure that that's on. Roadway plan alignment is kind of a no-brainer there. You want to see what the group has in mind to make sure that that's the right approach. And then at some point in the process, you'll be likely getting the preparation of construction drawings done, and notice to proceed with moving forward on that would come back.
Great.
Anything obvious that you think I missed? Yeah, there is. And we're building something out that may take us a year of process, but I've been looking at how would it go over the course of that year.
Great.
Okay, you had some discussion earlier about the consulting design engineer. I didn't dive in too far of it during the goals and objectives discussion, but my concept is engaging an engineer. At some point, this group's going to want information. They're going to want drawings. They're going to know what concepts could work. And if we engage somebody, have them ready for that person, it's helpful. I mentioned also I don't do lump sum contracts if I can help it. If it's redoing a roadway, yeah, maybe. But even those, I can go unit price and get away with it. For this would be Patrick Engineering or whomever you decide, when we need them, are coming in providing drawings, or they may not be at the meeting, but they may be drawing things. I got the sense from this group, we're not ready to get there yet, so let's get everything else going ahead of time. But at some point, if you're deciding that we should change engineers, I need to know probably 5 to 6 months ahead of time. Because to go through the qualified base selection process to meet IDOT standards, it's a big lift. And I need time to get that together going through it before IDOT approves of that engineer and we can engage them to do any work. So as we get closer, I'll circle back to this with you. The slide everybody's been waiting for. That's it? Oh, so you were waiting for that, I see, okay. I'm figuring you guys out.
So I think we have a pretty good part, and I welcome any comments further from the board, and if not, we'll open the board to public comment if there are any.
Oh, there's the chairperson for the HAP Road Committee.
I just want to say it again, that there wasn't a specific step, and we are just bringing it up, but that input from the residents as part of that process to help establish that goals is key, because you could otherwise come up with a plan that nobody really agrees with. So I would just say work into that process, some information gathering, insight gathering.
I fully believe, Alicia, that community engagement plan is going to have a piece that's built in for surveys of the village of a whole. And that group will come up with that to get that input, what people
The
want.
way I was reading it, though, was more like feedback, like we're going to give you some options and we want your feedback. And I'm suggesting get input before the options are designed.
That'll be totally the
yeah.
decision of the group as they come forward of how they want to do it. It's completely
Okay,
fine.
all right,
I mean, I'm imagining the kind of traditional, you know, you get the sticky pad and you write your suggestions and you stick them on a board, and then that's all compiled by the group. And that involves at least probably 2 public meetings that would be open to anybody to come and share their input.
right, right.
Yeah.
I do have one other thought when you guys were talking about, you know, rolling back the immediate next steps and reducing that budget. And, you know, lowering the speed limit is a short-term solution, but also crosswalks that are marked across HAP at key places for safety is a short-term stopgap action you could take. So that's all I have.
Thank you.
Kathy Estabrook, 1620 Mount Pleasant. What, you keep saying, well, we haven't heard back from the county yet, we haven't heard back from the county yet. Well, what are we waiting, what feedback are we expecting from them?
Sure, there are a couple things. First of all, is I wanted to explain to them what was happening here and didn't get a response. It's my understanding that a staff member has been out of work unplanned for some issues. So they're stressed time-wise, but there are a couple of key things. One is an update of where we are. Will you participate in this reevaluation process with us, as in, like, staff's sitting at the table with this steering committee? Will the county also have a seat or send a staffer to this to be participating in the process? And the third piece is the one mentioned earlier, is what do they want to do, or what are they going to do about the permanent easements? Are they stopping that process? Are they going to continue it because they need the sidewalks no matter what? And I haven't gotten an answer out of them. So the reason this meeting's still tonight is I think we just need to keep pressing forward, and I'll keep updating them on, here's what the board said, here's our plan, here's what we're moving forward with. And I'll just keep them posted and assume that when they have a big concern with what we're coming up with, they'll let me know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Yes.
Thank you for your time. Fred Steineman, Hap Road down the street here. Appreciate what you just said about that you haven't heard from them. And I understand with what's going around health-wise, people are in and out of work and such. But it's, as much as we're not being heard because we haven't heard from them, we don't know if they have stopped their process for Phase 2 and its completion, which was completing their drawings, which included their presentation from Winnetka all the way to Orchard here with the roundabout. We don't know if we even have a voice, let alone time to reevaluate what we would like to do, because we don't know if they are even open to it. When they were here for their presentation in September, they expressed very limited, and you said, you came back with like one of several options that they might consider, but many others were declined, saying this is not an option. These are not possible. And you reported to us in December that, or after our December meeting, when the board voted that no roundabout could be possible for this Hap Road project to move forward, we don't know if they're moving forward at all. And we don't even know if our reevaluation committee, a steering committee that we're talking about planning for, will have anything to say, and will county respond to that, or let alone listen to it. Do we have a direct line to somebody? Last month, there was a county representative here asking for us, the board, to decline some sort of affiliation to a project the county was proposing. That gentleman seemed familiar with us, and we with him. Would he have influence or some sort of conversational presence to have with the committee that's running the county side of this project? The other thing I questioned was in regard to the forming of a committee prior to this board's year and terms and such, previous boards, like in 2016 and on, made decisions for the village on behalf of the residents, and the following boards inherited those decisions and carried on or reevaluated them like we are now. So forming a committee would just give the county more time to proceed with what they're planning to do.
Sorry, Fred, can I stop you for just
Go
a
ahead.
second and just answer some of
Address.
your questions? Patrick Engineering, Rhina, works for the village. So the village has the contract with Rhina. Right after the board said, stop, reevaluate, we are not moving forward with the roundabout, I contacted Rhina and said, stop, no more drawing. So the county can't move forward with the design because the drawings are ours and they're not done. So Rhina has stopped drawing. So if you're concerned in the background that somebody's got their mechanical pencil at night and they're sketching this out, getting ready to slide it out to bid, I can tell you that's not going to happen. I've also notified the Northwest Municipal Conference has a subcommittee that goes through with IDOT for federal funding and took us off the expected projects list and said, we're reevaluating, we're done. Do not, they call it a letting list. The word we use is bidding. We had been on for planned bidding in September or November of this calendar year. I said, take us off it. So our federal funding gone sounds a little dramatic, but we are no longer funded for Hap Road project, which means that there's no money. We are in a contingency, meaning it's still out there, so whenever we're ready to come back, if we ever are, we can ask to be reconsidered. So it's not like a brand-new project as long as it doesn't change significantly. So if it helps you sleep better at night, it's not happening. Santa Cruz, as you probably recognize the name, has done nothing on the moving forward with filing any legal documents about easements. They're waiting to hear from Cook County and us to figure out what the next steps are, and that's been put on pause. So everything related to this project is paused. I honestly thought that some of the work happening along the east side was part of the utility relocation for the project, because it should have been going time-wise. It turns out that I was wrong. It wasn't related to the project. It's related to AT&T putting new infrastructure on the ground. So even that, utility relocations are not happening. The only thing this project has moving right now is reevaluation, and that is because I got a consensus from the village board during a public meeting that said, stop it. And for me, that's all I needed. We didn't have to cancel a contract. We didn't have to pass a big ordinance saying, terminate this agreement with Company X. This group, sitting as a body, when they say, that we have a consensus, Mr. Manager, get this done, that's what I do.
Thank you. One other comment was in regards to Charlie mentioning about information starting from scratch. Barnaby, you mentioned this earlier too, that all those steering committee meetings from the 2016, when it was first thought of, all that information is be readily available for the new steering committee to bring forward to the future ideas. The other thing that I did mention, and it was brought to my attention, when County was here and they made their presentation, and this is in regard to Charlie's topic, they expressed no willingness to slow it down regarding the present speed of Hap Road. Because Willow Road was a divider for the village, that whole project, and then that we negotiated with them, if you're going to put 4 lanes in, we're going to get a median, we're going to slow it down to 30 miles. County said, it was on record that County stated it would not slow down the speed without any sort of renovation. So presently, the way it is may be the way it is. Thank
Well,
you.
it can't hurt to ask, that's the point, you know? And Patrick, can you contact Scott Britton, our county commissioner that was here, regarding trying to get some kind of idea on why we're not getting any kind of response?
The last update I sent to the county about where we stood in the process, I got an email back that said, I'll be contacting you soon to set a meeting, and I haven't heard anything. So I know it sounds bad, but right now I don't need anything from them. So I haven't wanted to pull you're really kind of pushing by going up to an elected official. So I want to save that for the times when I really need something. And I'm not there yet. But like, there are times that we'll get there. I don't want to overuse that lever with Commissioner Britton.
I mean, how long has it been since you made contact and haven't heard back? What's that timeline?
2 or 3 months. It was, I can't remember what board meeting it was, or committee of whole meeting, the board said stop. So that was the outreach. But at the same token, everything's paused, so I don't have to.
Right.
And I know there's been some feelings about the county. The staff I've worked with have been fantastic. They are super good people, but they're also super busy. And I believe that this project went from a high priority, got to move this forward now, to it's getting reevaluated. And I got to work on the fires that are right next to me. So we've moved down to way back on that pile of stuff to do in the desk. So honestly, once we get to something really vital that I have to have information, I think we'll be able to get it through a multiple of sources.
Okay.
Mr. Graff?
I have a simple suggestion, or maybe a question. Is there any way at the next meeting where we can get a county official in here that can answer the simple question? We do not want the roundabout. We voted against the roundabout. What is the county going to do about that? Has that been answered anywhere yet?
I've kind of got the answer. There's not much they can do about it, Don. The funding was all coming through the village. The village board won't sign a contract for a design firm or a contractor to move this forward, aside from redesigning it on their own. Maybe they have some ownership rights over the documents for the things they've reimbursed us for, but they're not going to come up with millions of dollars to redo a project that they know the community doesn't want, because the community would be all over them.
What about the idea of us taking over the road?
I
Have they
think it's
answered anything about that?
I think it's an interesting concept. I don't think in my mind, you're not at the right time to do that. Because you've got a road that you know needs improvement. It needs storm sewer improvements, water, which are ours, roadway enhancements, curbs, landscaping. This project was going to be millions of dollars. If you take the road now, the county says, sure, it's yours. We're going to have to spend all that money. So it's better to wait, and normally under a jurisdictional transfer operation, with the state, I've done it before, the state brings it up to our standards. They say, village here, this road is to your standards, it's all yours. And then you have this asset that you don't have to spend a lot of money on for 30 years. If we take it now, we have something we know needs work. We're basically buying a used car without an engine, but paying for a brand new car. I don't know that we should do that. I'll do whatever the board wants. There's a time to do it. Right now is not it. I think we can ask when we engage with them, is this a concept you'd be open to? And when we start designs, there may be a particular element of the design that the committee really wants. A center median with trees in it. And the county says, you can't do that on our roadway. That's great. Would you consider, once this project's done, a jurisdictional transfer? Because then it can meet under our standards, because we would let a center median come in, but they won't. In my mind, for project development, that's the ideal time to raise that issue and try to make what the village wants happen most fiscally conservatively. I'm sorry to put such a fine point on this, but we started down a path and got 95, 98% done. To get us back to where we are today, this village is going to likely spend between $750 and $1 million just to get us back to the design spot we're at today, and you're not going to get grant fund for that. So depending on what we do there, we've got some big investments, and I'm here to help you get it done the way you want to have it done. Not you personally, sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
The group.
That's okay.
Don't want that in the minutes.
You brought up good timing a couple times, and based on that they're 2 years behind on the crosswalk over on Winnetka Road, and last spring, they said they were going to fix Sunset Ridge Road last fall. Good timing in Cook County, to me, is an oxymoron. Thank you.
Well, and also County Commissioner Britton had said that if the village does not want the roundabout, the county will not jam the roundabout down our throats, and that directly came from him. So Patrick and I were at a function where we talked to him about that, and so they're not gonna, the county's not gonna ram the roundabout if we tell them we don't want it. And that came directly from the commissioner.
Thank you. Any more public comment? I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn our committee of the whole meeting.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
What time are we going to restart?